It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us, Gregory Viscusi, reporter for Bloomberg News. How are you?
Fine.
Welcome back to the show. We want to welcome Fatma Kizibola, who is of France 24 fame, formerly our Istanbul correspondent. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Journalist Paul Moreira, documentary filmmaker, and the man who cracks the whip at Première Ligne Productions.
How are you?
Welcome back to the show, and welcome back as well to journalist Craig Kapitas, whose books include Mona Lisa's Pajamas. How are you?
Bonsoir, mon capitaine.
All right. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter. Hashtag World This Week. Should we worry? Gulf claims of sabotaged ships, the withdrawal of non-essential U.S. embassy personnel from Iraq, and a so-called maximum pressure campaign out of Washington that's looking to stop all Iranian exports of oil.
Mr. President, are we going to war with Iran? Hope not.
I hope not, says Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who this Friday has added that he's sitting by the phone ready for direct talks with Iran, but so far no one's called.
You're surprised?
Should we be worried? Is this?
I don't think he wants a war. I think for a bunch of reasons. I think that one, he wasn't elected on that. I mean, he was elected more to reduce American commitments around the world rather to increase them. I don't think his base wants a war. The U.S. generals certainly don't want a war. I think the U.S. military has warned them they certainly don't want it. But, you know, the wars happen by accident, and the things that he's doing raise the chances of an accident. You know, whether it's a bellicose tweet, some incidents in the Strait of Hormuz, between U.S. ships and Iranian ships. I mean, he's certainly raising the temperature, but I don't think he wants a war.
There was a precedent, 1988, the USS Vincennes, which shot down an Iran air jet by mistake. 290 people killed. Many people say the Lockerbie bombing was retaliation for that.
I'd say John Bolton wants a war. Yeah. Obviously, I mean, he's obsessed by that. I only met the guy once, I did a quick interview, and he was so sad. It was like 10 years ago, and he told me the only thing that really mattered to him was like, we're not going to strike Iran. And that was 10 years ago. So he's obsessed by that. Netanyahu is obsessed by that. So you do have some like rogue elements in the...
What do you make of this week's events, Paul?
Well, I don't foresee things in the future, but I know there's a logic, in massing up some force around Iran. Yeah.
Fatma, the week began with these claims that these ships had been sabotaged, and then it's all followed since. Again, the withdrawal of the personnel from Iraq. We now know a little bit more why Mike Pompeo suddenly skipped going to meet Angela Merkel to go off to Baghdad.
I think it was more like a surprise for everyone in the way that no one was expecting maybe the Houthis to make such technological improvement, So I think it was a surprise. Then
the drone attack on
exactly. Then I think we always need to ask the same question: is who benefits the crime? And I don't think that Iran is really willing to have such a kind of military confrontation with the United States. What is also very interesting, talking about the United States, is we have last week. It was this week. Mike Pompeo went and he made his first visit to Russia. He went to Sochi and he met Lavrov, but also Vladimir Putin. And there was a man with him inside the American delegation, which name is James Jeffrey. And James Jeffrey is the former ambassador in Turkey, and then he was in Iraq. So he's a man who knows the region very well. He's now the special envoy in Syria, and he was just sitting next to him during the meetings. And what James Jeffrey said right after this meeting, he was talking about Iran, but mostly about Syria, saying that Iran must withdraw its forces from Syria. So I think it's much more like a way for the United States to pressure Iran than really a way to get inside a new war.
But it gets back to what Paul Moreira was saying, Craig, which is which part of the White House is Donald Trump listening to? Is he listening to John Bolton, who's very hawkish, who's been associated in the past with the Saudi-backed MEK opposition group? Or is he listening to Mike Pompeo, who wants it as leverage for bargaining?
I have a photo in my office, which I'm very fond of. It's a photo of that ugly puss over there and I together, because we both covered Gulf War II for Bloomberg News in the region on the ground. And I'm actually quite interested to see what Greg thinks of what I'm going to say. I don't think Donald Trump and Bolton add up to a tinker's dam in this whole thing. It's all about Saudi Arabia and Princeling Mohammed bin Salman, who wants a war with Iran, has been pushing it to the extent that last year he released an animated video of himself, and I wish we had it to show the audience. You could find it on the internet, I believe, of him leading an animated army of Saudi soldiers into Iran. And I think it's the Saudis who we have to look to here, because I agree with everything Greg said about this, about Trump doesn't want a war. And I agree with what you said that, Bolton, he's a chicken hawk basically at the end of the day, but he wants a war. But I think we have to look at what the Saudis want here. And we don't know, because we're not getting any real reports from inside Mohammed bin Salman's regime on this.
But hang on, are you saying that MBS is the one who calls the shots in the White House?
Well, I think Jared Kushner does, but certainly with MBS. Look, Trump has a geopolitical problem, and thing is, I'm glad Greg's here because he knows this stuff actually better than I do, because he actually covers it daily. I only do it every week. It's all about the oil flow, right? And the Straits of Hormuz. You're looking at 40% of the world's oil traffic comes through the Straits of Hormuz. 40%. Now, any kind of conflict is going to shut that off. The Americans don't want that to happen. But the Saudis could care less. And I noticed that the Saudis, during Gulf War I and Gulf War II, the Saudis were hell-bent for leather in both instances. They didn't care about the geopolitical consequences. Now, of course, the prior king in Saudi, he kind of held back the war drums. But bin Salman is not doing that whatsoever. And he's working with Israel, and they'd certainly like to see an attack.
No, I don't think MBS and Netanyahu necessarily call the shots in the White House. But there's no question that Trump often agrees with the last person he spoke to. He got off the phone with Sisi, and he backed Haftar in Libya. He got off the phone with Erdogan and pulled the troops out of Syria. So there's, he has a tendency to be kind of played by these people, and I think Craig is absolutely right. That there is a danger that he could be played by one of these guys.
But what
if you look at the bigger picture, it's true that for the last 15 years now, Iran is the winner of all the war against WMDs and Syrian revolution and all that. They are basically in bed with Bashar al-Assad. They control Iraq thanks to the Second Gulf War.
But they're hurting now under these new sanctions.
Well,
but they're still very powerful.
They are hurting, but the people who it's hurting have no influence on what the regime does. I'll give you an interesting statistic. The World Bank, where you go to for this type of information, says that Iran, despite the sanction, has the second largest economy in the Middle East and North Africa. Now that's significant. These guys are not a pushover. They're 4 times larger than Iraq, and
it's a proud country. I think part of the problem here is I think Trump really misunderstands that the Iranians don't just fold easily. They lived under sanctions for 10 years before, and Craig made a really good point that it actually benefits, not that it hurts the people who don't count, it benefits the people who count in some cases. It actually makes some of the leaders in that country richer because of the traffic that they control.
One final point on this, you mentioned that drone strike on the oil pipelines in Saudi Arabia. If we chalk up in a grim fashion the losers of the week, it's the people of Yemen, because there was an airstrike that hit the capital, Sana'a, at least 6 killed.
Yeah, but I mean, the war in Yemen is now going on for more than 4 years. And this was my point in the way that the Houthis look quite decided to keep on going, and they are making some improvements. So the question again now is to say, okay, the Houthis made some improvements, some technological improvements, but it looks, I think, very unlikely to believe that they made that by themselves. Very probably they had some help, and everyone is thinking about Iran. But once again, I think that, it won't be very smart, let's say, from Iran to push them to launch such attacks, knowing that the United States is threatening them, and that it won't be absolutely in their own advantage.
Yeah, the geostrategic importance of oil, it's perhaps a 20th century concern when you look at information technology. And from some, the U.S.-Iran standoff pales in comparison to the escalating trade tension between Washington and Beijing. It went to a whole new level on Wednesday when Donald Trump signed an executive order declaring the U.S. telecom sector in a state of national emergency. Those are his words. And there's been since an effective ban on 5G player Huawei, a ban which has been met with, the predictable reaction out of Beijing.
We strongly oppose the US's approach of bullying, which goes against multilateral trade rules. If the US continues down this path, we will respond with countermeasures.
Fatma, are you surprised at because last week we were talking about the trade war, and now this Huawei ban has come on top of it?
I'm absolutely not surprised, actually. And I think that, if we need to be realistic, because at the end of the day, we are talking here about business. We need to be realistic. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about some giants like Apple, for example, Apple is not able today to make a product by itself in the way that they need to have some products coming from foreign countries. They design the products in the United States, but then they will buy some furniture in some countries and then manufacture the product, the same product in some other countries. So meaning that when Donald Trump is taking such decisions, it will also be like a hard time for the same American big giants companies.
But it's coming also at a time when the U.S. economy is booming. And so if there's any time to perhaps make this kind of sacrifice that Fatma is describing, Donald Trump has a strong hand these days.
The raging mediocrity of the Trump administration is now, part of daily life. What you raised an excellent point. Trickle-down theory, globalization. The Chinese buy in the neighborhood of, I think, $70 billion of components for all their gizmos from more than 13,000 companies in the United States. Globalization is real. What Trump is trying to do, since the day he got in, is turn it into global colonization with America in control. Now, here's a man who stands up and says, it's all part of the same weaponization of the dollar game plan, this colonization like the old East India Company. He stands up and he says, you American companies in China, come on back to the United States and do your manufacturing here. That's the talk of someone who didn't take economics in his junior year in high school. I mean, really, and it's not me. You can talk to any economists with PhDs, and they'll tell you the same
mistake he made with the car industry. He didn't seem to understand that he didn't seem to understand how in North America there's this flow of parts and manufacturing between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. He just thought that a car is either Canadian, American, or Mexican.
But let's take this
that all of them are all three.
Hold on, let's break this down for a second here. Is there a national security risk doing business with Huawei?
Yes.
Potentially, but I mean, if the rest of the world thinks that they can manage the risk, I don't really think that the British and the French and the Germans are that sort of loose and crazy that they would install this equipment if they're all if it all has a direct line to someone listening in China. On the other hand, weirder things have happened.
There are 4 mobile operators in this country. 2 of them partner with Huawei.
But I think there's a bigger issue though. I think that what Trump really wants to do, the Trump administration seems to think that they can reverse China's rise as a world power.
Yeah, I think it's that's a real topic.
And that's what, their initial demands in the trade war for China to change its economic model. It wasn't just tariff here or there, it was change your economic model.
And it has lasted for some time now. They're like construing China as a threat, and they're like massing up military power, United States all around China. And I think it's just one episode of a series.
Because
that
when
is
Barack
longer.
Obama as president goes to China and tries to lecture on human rights, isn't
It's
that
different now. Look. There's an elemental question here, and come after me if I sound like Bolton, but sometimes he's right. Here's the deal. There is a war going on in the world for economic and political dominance. They're connected like this. Now, if you're a worker, if you have a company, who would you rather have be your boss? Where would you rather live? Where would you rather do work? For a Chinese company, which is run by the Communist Party of China, which throws hundreds of thousands of Uyghur Muslims into concentration camps, does not allow Wikipedia. We can go down the list. All of our viewers know them. Or would you rather work and do business with the United States of America? You, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer, you global businessmen, you have to make the choice. And what Trump is doing is he's shoving that choice down people's throats. That's what's happening.
All right, when we come back, we're going to pick up on this point. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us, Gregory Viscusi, reporter at Bloomberg News. Welcome back as well to Fatma Kizibola, who is with France 24, and as well Paul Moreira of Première Ligne Productions. Craig Kapitas, author of Mona Lisa's Pajamas. Just before the break, we were discussing the standoff between the superpowers over technology, the holy grail, if you will, of the 21st century. The Economist newspaper, Paul Moreira, was quoting figures that show just how much this is not Cold War 2.0, because in adjusted terms, the U.S. did $2 billion worth of trade a year with the Soviet Union, and with China, they do $2 billion a day.
Sure. I mean, it's impossible to sever the links between those two countries. But again, I think that what it shows, it's more an issue of dominance and of pressure than really, when you think, could they use Huawei to listen to our conversation? It's interesting because we forget that the NSA has listened to Merkel's phone for years, and it didn't shock us more than that, And so I just don't take it seriously.
All right. Last week, we heard the U.S. Secretary of State in London lecture the U.K. Prime Minister on the dangers of Huawei. Republican Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton upping the pressure on Europe with his tweet where he hailed Donald Trump's decision, and he says it's still time for our European allies to safeguard their security by joining us. The response, well, the French president, as he toured the Viva Tech Summit here in Paris on Thursday, this is what Emmanuel Macron had to say.
It's increasing its impact all over the world, and I'm not one of those who say that we have to strike a trade war against China. Quite the opposite. But China has a very state-centered model where the government has a very important role, and it does not share our principles regarding individual liberty.
How did he do, Fatma, at Viva Tech? That was the... Yeah. How did Emmanuel Macron do when it came to... Because this was right in the middle of the storm, just after the announcement by Trump.
I think it's very interesting here because I just would like to underline here that Emmanuel Macron made that statement, but also at the same time, what he says, I mean, the position of France is to say, let's not be naive, but let's not also lose from this war. In the way that today, Huawei is not forbidden in France. They can come here, they can work with some French companies, but what the government says is that we will be watching very closely what they are doing here. And I think it's maybe the solution here, because at the end of the day, are we really talking about like a massive security problem, or is it like just that we're trying to slow down a giant that made massive progress during the last year? I mean, it's part of the game, right? I mean, they made some progress, and you have to run fast at the end of the day. So you cannot just be like sitting and crying like a kid and saying like, I don't want to play with you because you're better than me. What France says now is that we need, once again, let's not be naive, but we need to adapt to this situation. So maybe we need to work with them, and maybe we have something to learn from that.
Are France and the Europeans in general just kind of out of their depth on this? Because on the one hand, you have the content coming from the US, which owns all the social media giants, and you have the technology for the phones more and more coming from China.
Yes, but I mean, there are European producers too. I mean, a 5G network is never going to be built by one company. It's going to be built by several big companies relying on those 13,000 whatever suppliers that Craig mentioned. So I think the difference is that Huawei is one of the few that can actually build systems from start to finish. Mm-hmm. I mean, most of the other companies, there are a lot of other companies involved, including Europeans like Nokia, like Ericsson, Americans like Qualcomm, Cisco, Packard.
That's the
they're
point.
involved. They're
That's
involved
it.
in parts of it, but I don't think any of them can build the whole network.
What Ericsson and Nokia will tell you, yes, we can do it. And the people who want to buy go, great, how much is it going to cost? Oh, no, the Huawei is a lot cheaper. See ya.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's the reason. Because if these countries were so concerned about security,
Definitely. Yeah.
they'd go with Ericsson, they'd go with Nokia, they'd pay a few extra bucks, but they're not, because it's all about, what was it called, Greg? Shareholder value, is that the term I'm looking for?
Well, I mean, it is, these things are expensive, and someone's got to pay for it. And, you know, we all complain about our phone bills, so,
There you
know,
go.
it's...
Yeah.
The tightrope act of Emmanuel Macron, your thoughts on it, Paul Moreau?
Well, I like the en même temps, at the same time.
Yeah, that was during the campaign.
He says, we don't need to go in a war with China, but at the same time, we should be very careful. So you have everything covered. So that's Macron's style all the way.
But
That's what I think.
is he on top of this though?
No, I think it's just, no, I don't think it's something that concerns France very much. It's really something that
It should. I mean, we're having a 5G network on the way, and as I said, what
Yeah,
France.
I mean, you see, the topic is put on the table by the US and is just, catching the ball, and that's it.
More broadly, this Viva Tech Summit, it followed the Tech for Good Summit. There was also this Christchurch call where Macron, the New Zealand Prime Minister, and others like the leaders of Canada, Indonesia, Senegal, Jordan, all showed up to try to...
And the social media companies.
Yeah. And their focus was squarely on the U.S. in this instance, because those are the ones who own these social media companies.
Well, no, their focus was on hatred on the internet. It was on hatred on the internet. It's just that how many times have we dealt with this? I mean, we've had, this is going back many, many years. We've had all sorts of protocols and rules and, promises to police behavior on social media. I didn't really see anything particularly new in this Christchurch call. It seemed to sort of replace a lot of earlier pledges we've had from social media companies to better police content. But it wasn't aimed at the U.S., I don't think. I mean, it was very much in reaction to what happened in Christchurch, where an avowed racist put up manifestos on Facebook and then live streamed his killing rampage, and it stayed up there for an hour and had 1 million downloads. I mean, it's to prevent that kind of stuff from happening.
Yeah.
Macron can point domestically to unemployment, which has dropped to a 5-year low, but it's still the far right's Marine Le Pen in the lead 9 days ahead of European elections. Le Pen, who, by the way, will join kindred spirit Matteo Salvini, Italy's deputy prime minister, in Milan for a big rally on Saturday that brings together all of the far right, from the True Finns to Alternative for Germany, AfD. But please, says Salvini, don't call him far right.
I do not see an ultra-right Europe. Voters will decide who will be the leader. I don't see ultra-right. Communists, fascists, ultra-right, ultra-left. In my opinion, they are old and outdated categories.
Outdated categories, Gregory Viscusi?
I mean, look, I don't want to defend these guys, but I I mean, fascist is probably too strong a word, for a lot. I mean, in Italy, have there been any restrictions on liberty since this government took over? No. I just think what's interesting is you've got this big rally tomorrow of all these parties that pretend to have some common vision, but they don't at all. I mean, they're divided on all sorts of things. Just take Le Pen and Salvini. Salvini wants open borders in Europe so that migrants in Italy can go elsewhere, whereas Le Pen wants closed borders in Europe so that the migrants who arrive in Italy can't arrive in France.
So why are they all gathering together if they don't have the same interest?
Because they have a certain sort of anti-establishment vision. They have a certain nationalist vision. I think they're all agree that they want more powers coming back to national capitals from the European Union. I mean, they're all nationalists in that sense. But when you drill down to their specific policies, they're actually quite a mixed bunch, which is why they've never been able to create one common group in the European Parliament.
It's been 10 years since the financial crisis, Paul Moreira. What do you make of Saturday's rally?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I spent 2 months running after Bannon and trying to show his action in with that type of guys. He has the status of a rock star in Italy. It's incredible. He gets somewhere and there's like 40 cameras and people trying to interview him. He's close to Salvini. I think about the 2008 crisis, it's true. It's a defining moment for them because they have part of their speech is like anti-capitalist. They say, capitalism has reached the end of a cycle, as 2008 has shown. And basically, populism is the future. And you guys have the choice between two populism. It's either us with a pro-business agenda, or it's them, the Reds, the Corbyn, the Mélenchon, the Sanders.
That's interesting because Macron tried to make it him or Salvini. He's been trying to do that for over a year, hasn't he?
Yeah, him or Marine Le Pen. Basically, that's how he got elected. That was the deal. Either you wanted to vote for Marine Le Pen or you wanted to shield the French democracy from the danger of having a very, by the way, incompetent party at the head of the state. So it has been his strategy even his trick to get to power. And I think I've been following the Gilets jaunes movement now for a while, and there is a reality here. I mean, it's true that you have 20% of France that is left over. And
that's left out and excluded.
Left out, absolutely. And they won't find any decent space in the workforce for the next years. So they've been voting for them, and they'll continue.
I'm curious, Paul. When you did your film, the thing about Bannon and these guys,
Steve Bannon,
and they are fascists. Okay, call a fascist, folks. Marine Le Pen, you're a fascist. They seem very organized, or at least more organized than they were 10 years ago. What I haven't seen, and maybe I'm just not looking, is an opposition that is as organized as they are or better. I point to Farage in the UK as an example here. He's probably going to win, the election in the European Parliament, which astonishes me because our colleagues, all of us, we cover, they want to, remain in the EU. We're all pro-EU, but the pro-EU parties aren't getting any votes, at least in the polls at all.
Because he's a single issue man.
Brexit
was all the other parties. It's a whole mix of things.
In the larger perspective, have you noticed that? I mean, is that an accurate observation?
Yeah. No, I mean, they are more organized, and they use the social networks more than they used to. I mean, that's what Bannon tells them. We have the technological means to win now. I mean, he has done it in the US. The Brexit has been, totally flooded with
both the
with
Five-Star
fake
Movement
news.
and Salvini.
Yeah, this new technique has put Bolsonaro in power, and we have to take it very seriously.
Why hasn't the opposition been as effective?
Ethics? Or maybe I'm being naive.
They don't have I think the advantage these people have, they have a very simple message. Salvini, too many immigrants.
Yeah.
Le Pen, the elites have disdain for you. It's always one simple message they have, and I think that establishment parties are still caught up in having a whole mix of policies. I mean, look at Macron's party in the European election. They came out with like some 60-point program.
Wow.
What voter reads a 60-point program?
Well, maybe the opposition just don't want to answer their arguments in the way that, and this is the same in populism everywhere. They just pretend that they are what they call the real people. So maybe the opposition is just like, we just don't want to play in the same ground and we don't want to answer that kind of points.
All right, the difference, though, between Italy and places like the UK, yes, the Brexit Party will do well, but if you add up in the UK, all the parties that are pro-Remain, they might get more than 50% of the vote. If you add up, they're splintered, but they add up. Look at
counting Labour as pro-Remain. I mean, that's the thing. They're all so muddled.
Go away from the numbers for a minute, Frank. I mean, look, maybe I'm going down the wrong path here, but I'm not looking at the numbers. I'm looking at what we used to call the zeitgeist. Okay? The zeitgeist here is clearly with, we'll call them proto-fascists, baby fascists, is clearly with them and not with the opposition.
All right, with the populists, what is clear in Italy is that there it's crystal clear. The latest surveys before the Italian election, they have a law there, but the deadline for polling, I think it was a week ago. This is the French opinion polls, 23 versus 22%. But if you'd seen the numbers for Italy, 30%, I believe, for Salvini.
Probably has gone down because he's had a rough week. He had a bad week at the office.
But the Democratic Party, which is now the center and all of the left, is polling what, 22%,
22%, which is actually not so bad given that they were given for dead after the last election.
So where's the left gone? This is the country used to have a strong communist party. This is a country.
Well, there is another leftist party that's probably polling at about 5 or 10. It's the same. Where's it gone in France? I mean, where's it gone in? Even in Germany, the SDP has taken a bit of a battering. I mean, that's the big hole in European politics right now. Is the establishment center left has, except for Spain, has basically fallen out. And where it's not fallen out, like in Britain, it's because they've gone to the far left. So you can hardly even say that there's really a establishment center left anymore. In Britain.
They're in power in Portugal.
Portugal, yeah.
Which is always forgotten.
Iberia,
but-
yeah. So Iberia, in Iberia, Sanchez, Costas, yes, they're that's their base now in Europe.
You're saying he's had a rough week. There is blowback, it seems, against Salvini. There's been trouble in the cabinet, and then there was this last week in Bergamo. The fire department ordered in to take down an unflattering bedsheet that read "You're not welcome" before an event in that northern city. Well, since then, there's been so-called balcony protests against Salvini, and they've dogged him wherever he's gone. And it's quite something to see. This is all over the country. Gregory Viscusi, at some point, does Salvini overreach?
Let's not forget that at the European elections 5 years ago in Italy, Renzi, remember him? His party got 40%. He was the man who was going to save Italy. Within a year, they tired of him, and then he had to resign 2 years later. So I mean, Italians do tire rather quickly of leaders. They've not tired of Salvini yet. But if you watch his Facebook page, it's probably just a little too much of what he has for breakfast, what he has for dinner, what he's watching on TV that night, his latest ranting about immigrants. So I think he does have to be a little careful to sort of not to test people's patience too much.
All
and
right.
I'm not going to translate some of those things I just saw.
All right.
Those dirty words?
There are a few. 200 million television spectators can't be wrong. Yes, it's the Eurovision Song Contest this weekend. This year in Tel Aviv, a location that has fans of glitter and kitsch, pop anthems, asking the same question that, visiting football fans do when there are World Cup qualifiers.
It's super exciting for us Europeans to come here. So is this Europe? talking about Eurovision, or is it the Middle East? All these different religions mixing here, the Muslim, the Jews, and apparently there are some Catholics, but there's those you can't see.
All right. He's a little confused there, Pat. Why the Eurovision Song Contest is in Israel? It's the winner from the previous year. That's the country that hosts.
Okay, maybe I'm maybe the last one to.
You're
talk
not big
about.
on the Eurovision Song
absolutely,
Contest.
How can you miss it? It's like that in the European Cup final. It's like the only two nights when Europe exists as Europe.
I just think it's something silly, and I think it's disturbing for me to mix culture with politics, because at the end of the day, I have the feeling that, they give points according to, if they have some allies or if they want to make some progress. So, I just think that it's maybe not the best thing to do, to mix culture.
There have been some attempts to launch boycotts by certain groups, but generally it seems, as other years, a rather apolitical affair, Palmer.
Yeah, but in this case, it cannot be for obvious reasons. And it's interesting because I have many left and pacifist Israeli friends, and they've always said, we should be in the EU because that would smooth things down with our Arkish pro-Likud stuff, people, and but at the same time, I think it's a bit complicated to be in a country where we all know that something has to be done in favor of peace, in favor of justice, and it's stale now for years and years and years, and it's another way for me not to dig into the only important topic in the area, which is how do you solve the question of the Palestinian rights?
There's a good statistic coming out of this. Will there be more votes registered in Eurovision than in the Euro elections? That's what I'm looking for.
And while Israel may seem controversial, an Irish betting website, Paddy Power, has started a campaign for next year.
Vote for the UK in Eurovision, so next year they have to host the freaking festival. And so the island will get full again of Irish and Romanians.
All right, under the hashtag Brexit Revenge, they're trying to get everybody to vote for the UK on Saturday night. Gregory Vescusi?
How can you not enjoy Eurovision? It's just the night of total fun kitsch, and I hope they keep politics out of this one.
All right. The final word for Gregory Vescusi. I want to thank you. I want to thank Paul Moreira, Craig Capitas, Fatma Kiziwau. It's time now for Media Watch. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
We begin with gay rights. It's the day when Taiwan legalized same-sex marriage.
Yes, absolutely. The International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia is its full title. It's a bit of a mouthful. But largely speaking, the message is a very simple one. UNICEF tweeting this today, a very simple message, love is love. And lots of people thinking that that really is what today is supposed to be about. They had this message at the top. Love is not a crime. Discrimination is not an option. Love is love. Now, as you mentioned, Taiwan, of course, the first Asian country to legalise same-sex marriage today. Ahead of the vote, the president of Taiwan actually tweeted this: "We have a chance to make history and show the world that progressive values can take root in an East Asian society. Today we can show the world that love wins," and indeed love did win. Interestingly, in the United States today, there was a vote there too for the Equality Bill. It's unlikely to become law because it will hit a stumbling block in the Senate, but it did pass through the House of Representatives, despite the fact that President Trump referred to it as being packed with poison pills. So there had been quite a bit of resistance to it, but that's passed through in the House of Representatives. Unlikely to become law, though. Another interesting thing that happened today, it may be coincidental that this came to an end, this story that's been rumbling on for over a month now. Israel Folau, an Australian rugby player, very well known, he's played 62 games for his country, has been booted out by Rugby Australia after he posted some messages on social media that were deemed to be homophobic. It has caused a huge round, and what he actually said was, "Hell awaits homosexuals." But he's completely unapologetic about it. The post remains for his 359,000 followers on Instagram. You see it in the middle there. Drunks, homosexuals, adulterers, fornicators, hell awaits you, is what he had to say back in April.
Oh, God.
Unsurprised. What's interesting to note is that nearly 60,000 people have liked that tweet. And there are a lot of people taking to Twitter today to say, it's freedom of expression. He has said that himself. He's considering his options now. He may appeal against Rugby Australia's decision. But he says it is freedom of expression, it's freedom, it's his religious right. But he doesn't seem to accept that there is freedom for homosexuals to live alongside everybody else.
All right, at the beginning of the show, Craig Kopitas pointed to the United States' soft power, and what better example than Game of Thrones?
I'll take your word for it, because I've actually muted Game of Thrones as a phrase on Twitter. I've never seen a single episode, and it has been going absolutely mad. And lots of things still escaping through that muting filter, especially if it's a promoted tweet, I noticed. But it would appear that even the fans of Game of Thrones have grown a little tired of it, and they're not too impressed with this long-awaited Season 8, which is the very end of it all. Last episode will air on Sunday. We'll wait and see what the reception is like, because fans have been taking to change.org because of this petition, remake Game of Thrones Season 8 with competent writers. More than 800,000 people have signed that now. It's ticking up all day long. It's very impressive indeed. What the person who came up with this petition says is that the writers have proven themselves to be woefully incompetent when they don't have the books to fall back on. This series deserves a final season that makes sense. Now, Have I Got News for You, which is a UK comedy show, had this to say. Game of Thrones fans launch a petition because the show about zombies, dragons and a boy who can turn into a pigeon has become a bit far-fetched of late. Interesting stuff. Not everyone hates it, though. There's a review in The Guardian from Luke Holland. He says it's miraculous, visceral and visually stunning and a fitting end to the series. Rolling Stone has dug out an old interview it did with the two writers of the show, where they asked about the reactions of fans, and they said, we know full well that they won't be shy about it if they don't like it. They haven't, as far as I know, commented on the reactions so far.
All right, and we were talking about Karl Lagerfeld's cat a few weeks ago, and now you have some more tragic news for us.
It is very sad news. A lot of people in mourning on Twitter because Grumpy Cat, who the New York Times say was the internet celebrity with a piercing look of contempt, is dead at 7. Now, he actually...
Young.
Yeah, it's very young, but he suffered from dwarfism. He even looks grumpy in the arms of J-Lo. That's how committed he was to his look. But he had an overbite and dwarfism. That's why he looks a bit funny. But he was originally posted on Reddit 6 years ago. This is the start of it all. Reportedly, he's earned more than $100 million for his owner. So she might be in mourning, but she'll be rolling around in some cash too. This is my favourite tribute that I've seen online today, though. So this is heaven. I hate it.
I want to thank our panel once again.
That is funny.
And a fitting tribute to Grumpy Cat to conclude this week's show. Many thanks for being with us here in The World This Week.
Where did you find that? That's the